Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, tell me how. Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, let's do it now. Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, you're the one that makes fishing so much fun. Well, hey, Mr. Pond Boss, tell me what I need to raise a big old honking moss back. Line breaking, tack tearing up moss back. Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, tell me what to do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
You know, it always starts off maybe with a phone call to the office, your office or my office, where somebody says, hey, I want to build a lake. But it also ends up starting off like this, where we're rolling down the highway making miles because they don't pack that land up and bring it to us to look at. So today we're headed out to look at several lake sites, and Bob Lusk here, getting to hang out with my longtime great friend Mike Otto, premier lake builder. Otto, here we go.
All right. One of the things that you said is absolutely positively the truth. We both wore out pickups, sets of tires, going to look at projects like this. We spent lots and lots and lots of times together in the front of a pickup, doing exactly what we're doing now, talking about the kids, the grandkids, and how to build lakes. And like you said, none of it's ever very close. Occasionally we'll get a close job, but most of the time we leave before the sun comes up like we did this morning, and it's unusual to get home before the sun goes back at night. And I got to tell you, these are some of my favorite days. I've got some of my best memories doing this. We've met some of the best people on the planet doing this, so it's all a pretty good deal, and I've enjoyed it. It's been a blessing to get to do this kind of stuff. You know, I could have been working on a road crew somewhere. But
we started off as a stick picker, right?
I started off as a stick picker.
17 years old.
They let me out of high school, and I needed to do something to...
Wait. You said they let you out of high school?
They let me... When I got out of high school, there were three people that were very, very, very pleased. One of them was my mother. The other one was the people at school. And the last and the most pleased was me. School didn't have much. School didn't offer me much, and I didn't. After I found out it wasn't going to be easy for me to do, I didn't put much into it either. So.
And here you are, 50 plus years into a career building lakes and ponds and roads and house pads and fence rows and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, and in our 50th school reunion, the English teacher there found out I'd wrote a book, and it almost finished him off.
Written a book,
yeah.
Yeah, so how did he take that?
He was very, very supportive of it.
Could he believe it?
I couldn't believe it, but he's a Catholic monk, and he's got some charities that I've been donating to for decades. But we have not talked since high school. That was kind of my making amends process to him, or donating money to some of his charities, and he made note of that at the reunion. It was a Zoom reunion.
Oh, wow.
So it was pretty neat. So we talked about that just a little bit in the book, and they were all. He was very surprised, and I was too. I was not voted the most likely to succeed, but my life has been good, and I sure have enjoyed it.
And the name of the book is Just Add Water.
That's correct.
You can buy that on the Pond Boss website store. So if you're getting ready to build a lake, highly recommend you get that book, because it's got Mike Otto's best stories, some of his pitfalls, pratfalls, things that you need to know about when you're getting ready to build a lake. And the purpose of this video is to talk about that. So I think the first thing, let's start at the start. How does it begin? Somebody calls you and they say, just take us through a typical conversation. Not that they're all typical, but somebody rings your phone number, then what happens?
Good gosh, I think the key word was none of them are typical. All of them have a little bit of difference to them. But there's a couple of things, the phone calls are like that. The thing that I start off with almost always is, kind of what you want. What are you after? What do you think you can have?
What are the goals?
Yeah, what are your goals?
Why did you buy this property? What do you want to do with it? Why do you want to build a lake? What are you going to do with the lake? Who's going to use it? That's the kind of stuff you take them through?
Always.
Yes.
I asked them a couple, people are at different degrees of what they've done with their homework. Some people already have read information. Some people have built ponds and lakes before. Some people move out to the country and see a body of water on the way to where they're going, and they want one of those on their on the place that they just built. So that's usually the first thing we'll start to really get down the nuts and bolts of it. What have you done? What do you know? And then I'll give them a couple of real general observations. To build a lake, you got to have dirt and you got to have water. And you can supplement both of them with enough time and money, but you need to kind of try to start with that, and that will get those people headed in the right direction.
So when you talk about dirt and water, how do they figure that out? What is it that has to be done, and how do you help them do that?
First thing I tell them to do is look at the places, the pieces of property around them.
Okay.
Is there a pond when you're driving to your property? Are there other ponds around you? Are they full of water? It's hard to build a pond on top of a hill if you wanted one right next to your house and your house was on top of a hill, because you don't have any natural drainage. And so you talk them through drainage, you talk them through the kind of dirt, you try to talk them through the kind of dirt that holds water. Most people think that the only classifications in dirt are like red and brown. And if they've got red dirt, well, then they think that it holds water.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is me and you know, those are probably the least telling traits that dirt has.
Color doesn't matter.
Doesn't make a bit of difference.
It's how much clay you got. So, the kind of what I do when I'm talking to them on the phone, if I can get the address from them, I'll get on my computer and look at Google Earth or MapRight or one of the map programs on the internet and find the property. And the first thing I do is I look at the topography and start to measure the watershed. So what I hear you saying is they got to figure out how many acres drains into that site where they think they want to build a pond or a lake, and see just what that is. Because where we live, 8 to 10 acres of watershed feeds 1 acre of pond.
Right.
So if they've got an 8-acre watershed, they can't have a 10-acre pond.
That's right.
And counter to that, if they have a 300-acre watershed, they don't need to build a 3-acre pond.
That's right. All those things are part of the process.
So you got to figure out that. So process, that's the key, right? Because we all have a process. So the process with your mindset, number 1 is establish goals. Number 2 is figure out how big the watershed is. Where's your water going to come from? And number 3, what kind of dirt do you have? If you don't have the right size watershed and the right kind of dirt, then that's obstacles that have to be overcome.
Okay, now you covered a lot of ground in about 2 minutes, and I normally don't get to maps quite that quick. It takes me a little bit longer, depending on what they've done. Depends on whether they've got their, depending on what they know. If they know that not all dirt holds water, well, then you can kind of pass over that just a little bit. But truly, in today's world, the last 10 years, there are lots of people that don't have that conception at all. They just don't. They just think if you dig a hole and get water in it, you're going to be catching fish pretty soon. And the truth of the matter, they think they're all like swimming pools. And the truth of the matter is, you kind of need to walk people through that. And for me, it's it's not necessarily a delicate process, but it's something that I want them to understand more than me just explaining to them.
So when you're trying to educate somebody, what are you telling them to do?
First of all, look at what's next. Look at what's next around them. After they've kind of talked about their goals a little bit, but look what's around them and see if they've got any other ponds on their property or on the property next to them. I love to tell the story about when you and I went out to West Texas to a place called Nubbins Ridge, and we drove up on a lake site. It was about a 10 or 12 acre lake site, and the beautiful floating dock was exactly on the bottom And the only reason we knew there was a dock there because it was attached to the top. The weeds and trees had already started to grow up through the bottom. And the man that we were dealing with had the lake built. The lake builder, obviously, and neither did he have any idea that that land would not hold water out there. So I try to tell people those kind of stories and let them understand that it needs to be done right from the very beginning. But I really do try to, we've put liners in not hundreds, but literally dozens of small lakes, and some as large as 10 acres. So you can supplement the water a little bit. You can supplement the dirt a little bit, but you need to let them know that the lake goes from a $100 lake to a $200 lake.
Yes.
And they need to know that before they do anything.
So they don't have. So you figure after the watershed, then you're going to start digging around looking for clay, basically.
That's
so
right.
You're digging test holes.
Yes.
And you go through what you call the contractor's field test, which is what?
You get some dirt in your hand. It needs to have a certain amount of moisture. And what you do is you roll it in your hands into about the size of a golf ball. And once you get it to the size of a golf ball, then you put it between your thumb and your forefinger and start to roll it like that until it's about the size of your finger. Once it gets to the size of your finger, continue to roll that dirt until it gets down as small as it can possibly get. If it's got clay content, it will hold together very well in the golf ball type, in the golf ball stage, and it will hold together in the size
like a thread.
Yeah, just like a thread.
Yep.
When it has the properties to do that, normally it has the properties to hold water and bond together well enough to build a dam that will hold the water. So I let people play with that. I teach people that all the time. If a landowner's ever going out with somebody in the dirt business and they don't have if they don't have a handful of dirt with them, they probably now they may be native to the area and know what they've got before they get there, but very seldom do I walk up on a piece of people's property without doing the contractor's field test, whether I'm telling them I'm doing that or not.
Yes. So
that's something that they need to know how to do. The contractor will need to know how to do. We're jumping ahead of ourselves on testing that dirt, but we'll, if it's a very big pond and we're not sure about it, we'll have that dirt tested professionally. And there's nobody in the dirt business that you want to hire that will be insulted by having a professional check their work. Most of us are glad that we've got somebody looking over our shoulder that will either agree or disagree with what we're saying. But that's all, that may be 2 visits before we get to that stage right there. After we've done a little bit of that, we start looking at maps. And another good thing about maps that we kind of brushed over just a little bit, it'll help us measure stuff, but it'll also help us, Bob, look at the surrounding area. Nubbins Ridge, if you were to look at the topographic map on Nubbins Ridge where the guy had no water, there was not another hole of water for 100 miles in any direction. Okay, over in East Texas or in southeast Oklahoma or in Arkansas, if you look at a map, you'll see bodies of water everywhere. Yeah, so those are also good indicators. It's not just fun to look at, but there's a lot of information that can be gleaned from looking and playing with the map.
Looking at aerial photographs.
You bet, absolutely.
So on Sunday you take the Bible to church, and on Monday you carry a shovel to work.
And that's exactly right. And about half the time our work is done on a Sunday because a lot of the people today are only available on the
weekends.
You bet.
Yep, I got you.
All right, let me talk to you a little bit about maps. You'll remember this. Most people don't know very much about this, but when me and you first started in this kind of a business, maps were not readily available. If I wanted to look at a map, I could go by the Soil Conservation Service, or I could go to a private company, and one of the best that I used was a place called Mapsco.
Mapsco.
Oh man,
we lived by Mapsco.
Oh gosh, they were great. They always had rock candy up on their counter. You come in, you put a piece of rock candy, and nobody ever ate that rock candy. Nobody likes rock candy, but that's what they offered you. And then they would help you find the map that you needed. You paid $3, $4, $5. The price was cheap. The rock candy was okay. It took an hour to get there. That's the problem.
Yes.
Today, like you just said, you'll be looking at maps of somebody's property before you get off the phone.
Exactly.
Okay. As soon as I get off the phone, I start doing the same thing. Yep. I start looking.
I remember you bought a series of programs, paid $300 or $400 to plug all these maps into your computer and download them off the CDs.
300.
Yeah.
My goodness, it was 3,000.
Really?
Yeah, and they were the most valuable things I ever had. Now that was like for Oklahoma and Texas.
And that was like in the 90s, early 2000s, right?
They had programs available like that. You beat yourself to death trying to get information out of them. You needed to be a professional computer person to really walk through that stuff. I did have one lady that worked for me for about 10 years and got pretty good at it. But nowadays, they're all online.
And you can find them just like that.
Almost instantly, yeah. You can follow them. You can follow the road to the place. You can put in a GPS number. You can do just about anything to get where you need to be to start to have those maps.
I went to a meeting yesterday over in Sherman where they're thinking about building they want to build a reservoir to store a 10-day supply of water in case something happens to their main pump coming out of Lake Texoma. So they called me, and their engineers want to build a 100 million gallon reservoir out of concrete.
Oh, I love it.
So they said my job was to can we build a lake and maybe put some fish in it and have 100 million gallons in a lake? And I said, yes, you can. And so we started doing that. They pulled up a map program that zeroed in on that water treatment plant in Sherman. Not only could you see the roads, you could see the ice chest in the back of the pickup of one of the workers' trucks that was parked at that. So today's maps are pretty dead-gum accurate and easy to access, and they're a go-to tool for guys like you and I.
Yeah.
And, my conversations always turn to that.
Those maps are surprisingly accurate and up to date. I don't know how often they photograph. They do it pretty, in some areas they do it pretty often. We do have a lake or two that's a year old that does not have the new finished product on it yet, but that's pretty rare. If you're very close to a main road, anywhere near a metropolitan area, your maps are going to be updated. They'll be accurate pretty quick. You'll know whether the cooler in the back of the pickup is, got beer in it or whether they got Coca-Cola in it. They've done really very, very well with that.
Okay, so when we're designing a lake, we look at the dirt. What kind of dirt is there? Is it feasible to use that dirt to build a dam if it's going to be a pond that needs a dam? And then how big is the watershed that feeds it? Or where's the water going to come from? So, and then you're figuring out watershed, and you're figuring out the characteristics of the dirt. You got the goals in hand. So the next step in that process is what?
Okay.
How do you take people through that?
All right. The next step really involves the maps also. You can very easily find the best place to build a dam. And boy, I need to qualify that, but you can usually find the best place to station a dam. You can usually find out how big the dam will be from hillside to hillside. At that time, when you're doing that, you also need to kind of check on where the neighbor's property is. We've got to make sure we get water back into the original creek, but just as importantly, we don't want to have water over on our neighbors. And all that is still done with a map. From now, we've shifted from maybe topographic maps, maybe to some aerial photographs, maybe some satellite imagery. Those maps are also good to find out whether your neighbor has something up above you that will block your watershed. But we're still playing with the maps. We really hadn't spent any real money yet. Nobody has probably been out with anything bigger than a shovel to dig test holes. You can determine with those maps still. You've got a huge pecan orchard, or you've got a wildlife area that maybe you want to disturb or you don't want to disturb, so that'll help you kind of wrap your mind around. You may want to change some of what you thought about at the beginning, depending on what the rest of the property is about. But I'm still on the maps. I'm still letting these people play with them. I'll come out and say this looks like the best place to place a dam, and leave them with the knowledge that once we get started, once we clear trees, we may very well change the location of the dam. We may say it makes a lot more sense to move upstream 25 feet, or it may make more sense to move downstream a quarter of a mile. We built a relatively large lake in southern Oklahoma. I had it mapped off at about 6 or 8 acres, and when we had an engineer look at it, he found another couple of hillsides downstream that doubled the size of that lake. So a second set of eyes on maps will help. We really didn't confirm that second site until after there was some clearing done, and it was a little bit easier to figure out what we're up against. So that's how I play that. I walk them through it. I give them as many ideas as I can. I continually let them know that we're going to be doing A, B, C, and D, and then when we get to D, we're going to have more information, and we may change a lot of things. Very seldom do we get onto a place that we say you absolutely cannot do anything right here. We've had people that wanted a pretty large body of water. Their land did not hold, the dirt was not any good at all, and we put liners in as big as 10 acres. But they knew about that before we got started. Most of the time, we have at least marginal conditions to get something that somebody would be satisfied with. So that's kind of how we get started with that anyway. I don't make too big of promises, but I want them to dream just as big as they possibly can at the beginning. We can always cut stuff down later.
When designing a lake, one of the first things we do is we look at the watershed size, and we look at the kind of dirt that there is. If we don't have really good dirt, which means clay, then we come up with a different idea on how to skin that cat, so to speak. So job one is figure out what the goals are. Then the next thing is take a look on maps and just study how big the watershed is. Does it feed into a site that looks good on the topography, where you can tie two hills together? Then we can do some quick measurements just to get a rough idea of the span that would take to close in that gap to back water up. And on the map, we can pencil that in, and the map will tell us about how big a lake site could possibly be. And by that point, we're talking more to the clients about getting out on your land, figure out what it is that you want to do, and does it interfere with your usage? Is the lake going to back up on your best deer hunting pasture? Is it going to mess up your food plots? Is it going to change the travel corridors for wildlife? If it does, you got decisions to make. Are you going to flood a 300-year-old pecan tree? If you are, you may just decide not to flood that tree. So when you're figuring this out, and here's a real-world application. I looked at a site on a map with a guy that wants to buy some land and maybe build about a 50-acre lake. So I plugged in the dam site that I could see that would fit there. He contacted an engineer, and the engineer says that you cannot have a 50-acre lake there. So my question to the landowner was, why did he tell you that?
Yes.
And he said, because the watershed was 600 acres, and you can't put water up to the top of that dam. You got to have enough freeboard for that dam to be able to collect flood waters and then release them slowly. So the biggest lake you can have on that site, even with a dam big enough for a 50-acre lake, would be a 30-acre lake. So he decided for the cost that it would take to build that dam, he didn't want to spend the money and only end up with a 30-acre lake. So he backed out of that deal and didn't buy the land. You know, so there's a lot of things that go on in the planning and designing stage, and you've really got to think it through. And I tell you, one piece of advice I would give people is don't be in a big hurry. Take your time to learn it, because the bottom line is you're going to be making decisions, and when that bulldozer shows up or that trackhoe shows up and they start taking down trees and moving dirt, you're going to change the ecology and that environment, that ecosystem for at least 5 generations past you. So the decisions you make up front are crucial, very important decisions. So think it through before you do it. Get with somebody like Mike Otto and make a good plan and execute the plan after you get it done.
One of the statements that you made is probably the hardest thing for people to do, and that is take a deep breath, sit down, take a deep breath, and say, you know, it's going to be, you know, the water feature is going to be there, like you say, for generations. It's going to be there a lot longer than any house or barn or fence or anything else that you do to that piece of property, and it's going to affect it for a long period of time. You want to do that as close to properly as you possibly can, and that's especially true when you're looking for property to buy in the first place.
Exactly.
If you've already got the family farm, if you've inherited some life, you know, if you've got some land that came with your wife, well, that's a little bit of a different story. But if you're going to buy some, if you're looking for land, don't let a real estate guy talk to you about a big giant hole in the ground.
In 10 miles, take exit 66 onto State Highway 29 toward Elmore City.
Just recently I visited with a guy down by Blanco, and he had a beautiful house site, and he had a giant hole out in front of this house site that all the dirt had been excavated to build the roads in this housing development. In the housing development, that's a little bit of a miscalculation of what that was, because they were all about 10-acre lots, so they weren't small lots, but there were a lot of loads of dirt, a lot of roads, a lot of dirt moved, and a huge hole right in front of his house. The real estate people told him all he needed to do was put a dam across the 2 narrowest points, and he would have the most beautiful lake in the whole development. There are 2 problems with that. Number one is the dirt in that they excavated to build the roads was good road building material, as bad as anything I've ever seen for holding water. And number 2, there was absolutely no watershed to this at all. He would have had to bring water in 5-gallon buckets to fill it up. Now, truly, it looked good to the untrained eye, but after you've been there just a little bit, and for me, it was a very little bit. I mean, he was going to leave. When I got done with him, he was going to have a broken heart that I don't think we could fix. So don't let somebody talk you into something that you don't think you're not positive about. There's a lot, right now there's lots of land for sale all over the country, and there's lots of good places to build ponds. So if you're in the discovery stages of this, take your time. The good Lord will lead you where He wants you to go. Don't get too ambitious at the beginning, because that's when you always will make mistakes. Like I said, it's a little different if you already own the property. Then you got to kind of work with what you've got. Always planning, the success of a project will always be in the planning of it. So kind of keep that in mind when you're walking through this to begin with.
Okay, so we've gone through the planning phase. Now it's time to get out there. We got good clay, we have good amounts, it's close by where a dam can be built. So now let's go through the process of building a dam. So when you go out and you bring the machinery out and you get ready to build a dam, and you've got all the planning done as much as you can, you know, because there's unknowns yet, because you don't know what's underground. I remember you telling the story one time about you bid a job to build a pond for a guy, and you got 12 feet down under the ground, and you felt something metal scraping against the blade, and it was parts of a Model T Ford that some farmer had buried in the depression. You know, so when you start that process of building the lake, what do you do? Kind of take people through that process. What do? You clear the site. Let's go through that.
All right, let's In today's world, almost always the very first thing we do, at least in the places that I work, is they have a 811 number. It's called Dig Test, and you call those people and you let them know what you're doing, and they will locate any underground utilities that you have that might possibly be where you're going to work. Lots of times that doesn't mean much. We've had a couple of times when that was very important and we found that out. So that's one of the first things you want to do. You want to do as much homework as you can below ground. The next thing you want to do, and you'll have done this from the maps, is you want to see kind of where you think the dam will be placed. Now, really what we're talking about is a lake, but if you don't have a good dam, everything starts at the impoundment itself. That has to be placed where it's the cheapest to build it, and then it also where you can get rid of the water the most economically way. So, map in hand, try to pick out the location of the placement of the dam. Now, some places you can see from point A to point B. There are no trees on the property, and in that case, you're kind of running and gunning from the very beginning. But if not, you want to be able to clear at least a line of sight so you can start to see a little bit more what you've got to deal with.
So what you're going to do, you want to be able to see so you can plant your flags to build, figure out where the dam site's going to be, so you clear enough area out to get rid of the trees and the rocks and whatever so you can see, and then you go in and stake out the dam site?
I do that at the same time we're doing the initial clearing. I'm always thinking in terms of this. All right, we're going to work for a day. We're going to clear this site. The divorce papers are served. The land doesn't hold water. The bank calls and said the Bitcoin crashed. Something happens and we stop that process. This does not happen very often, but I always do clearing with this in mind, that we're going to walk away from it, and what we've done, we want to be able to make it look like a state park. So if there's big, huge trees or nice bluffs, or if there's some features there that we may want to save if we don't build a lake, I try to work around those things at the very beginning.
So even when you bring your machines out, you're thinking the worst case scenario in case, what if we get here and this doesn't work like we want it to and we have to abandon the project? You want to do the least amount of damage while you're going through the due diligence process. So that's still part of the planning phase, is that right?
That's exactly right. I've got one of those right now. We've got a lake that we started the clearing stages on over a year ago. We left all of the big, healthy trees all over the lake site down in the bottom, which there weren't really a lot in the bottom, but all of them along the sides from where the proposed water line was down to about 15 foot deep. So if we walked off from that place, it would look like it was cleared for a state park or a golf course and would not have neutered that area. Okay, I fully believe that project will go forward. We'll take the rest of those trees out, but we did enough clearing at that time to say, okay, this is where the dam will be placed. This is where the water line is going to be. Most of the time, for as important as the dam is, the people that I deal with consider the dam to be second nature to where the water is going to be. And so my planning, my speeches, my talk, my flagging all goes around where the water will be when the lake is full the lake is full to the maximum capacity. Bob, to get back to a little bit more what we're doing with the landowner at this stage in the process is we want them on the ground with us. We want them to see where water is going to be when the lake is full. Most of the time, that's the most important part of the process to them. And at the same time, I have to be thinking of where the most economical place to build a dam is, and that economy of the dam also has to do with properly being able to discharge the water. There's a a couple of rules that I go by that a landowner may not even care about, but they need to know that when water is released from a reservoir, it has to end up in the original creek that it was flowing through to begin with. And if it's not, there could be some ramifications, and most of the time the ramifications will come with a lawyer involved. So don't take any shortcuts on that. Same with the upper end of a lake. You know, it's always better to have a lake with a water level that's at a lower elevation than to ever take a chance of getting water onto your neighbor's property. A verbal agreement and a handshake is great to get started with if you're going to back water up on somebody, or if you're going to reroute the water when it's discharged. Before it's done, that needs to be taken care of properly. There needs to be some kind of restriction or some kind of add-on with the deed to make sure that when you sell that property, or when your kids sell that property, or more importantly, when this property below you sells, that is has been designated so that we don't have to make an adjustment in the size of the lake 10 years after the lake.
There's a guy dealing with that right now over in Jacksonville, Texas, where he backed water up. Well, he didn't. He bought a lake that had been backed up on the neighbors for 25 years, and the neighbor sued him, the new landowner, to get the water off. Because he thought it was a valuable area he could graze his cattle, even though it'd been that way for 25 years. Well, Mike, what I hear you saying is that after you get through the very first planning phases on maps, you've spent time on the ground, you started moving some dirt to clear the dam site. The next thing you do is you flag the water line so you can see the maximum level that the lake could be, and then you're scouting out to figure out the best place to build the dam. And the dam, by the way, is a structure, not unlike a building. You're going to build it on a foundation, and it's going to have a job. And its job is to impound water, retain water, leak minimally, and then release excess water in an orderly fashion. And that water's got to be dumped out on your property back into the creek bed before it goes to the neighbor's property.
Okay, every bit of that's absolutely correct. It has to be done that way. There are no exceptions to that. If you've got some problems with where water is going to be on your neighbor's property, you may be ending up buying that property whether you want to or not. All right. Now that we've done that, and very seldom is that done on a lake of any size in one trip. A lot of times that's done over, maybe 2 or 3 trips out there. That's good for the contractor to kind of get the feel of what's going on, but it's also good for the landowner so they can kind of get a feel of what they're fixing to get themselves into. Once we've got that generally taken care of, the very next phase in the process, and this is as important as anything that you do, we need to dig some test holes to find out what is below ground. This is like a biopsy before somebody goes to surgery. It's like a x-ray before you get your arm set. The more information you know, the better off you'll be. Those test holes do a couple of different things. Number one, they let you know what kind of dirt
in 2
you've got
miles,
to deal
take
with.
a slight right
That's
turn onto
number
North
one.
County Road 3970.
But also, the depth of the test hole will tell you maybe at different elevations you've got different degrees of clay that you can or cannot use. The test holes that are dug down in the creek will determine how deep the core trench needs to be.
What's a core trench?
Let me tell you what a core trench is. You just explained very well that the structure, that a dam is a structure unlike a house, and all that we ever see of it is what is above ground. And truly, below ground is equally as important, and maybe more important, because we're not exactly sure what we have, but it's as important or more important than what's above ground. The core trench / keyway / cutoff trench is an area or a zone that is excavated from the surface of the existing ground down to a depth of sometimes 6 inches, sometimes 15 feet, sometimes deeper than that. And what that core trench does is put a barrier.
Take a slight right turn onto
Very
North County
seldom
Road 3170.
less than
Then take
8
a slight
foot
left turn onto
wide
East County Road 1630.
down to the elevation where you're tying back into the parent material. Sometimes through a creek, Bob, there will be 4 or 5 different layers of material that has been excuse me.
All right, so you're digging a core trench, and the core trench has got different aspects to it, which you've got what's going on down in the bottom of the creek, which is layered soils that go down to whatever depth it is, but then you're tying back in to the hillsides, and that dirt's probably going to be even different.
Yeah, that it's going to be a lot different. That this earth has been around for a long time, and when we talk about dirt being deposited in the bottom of a draw or a ditch or a creek, it has been going on. We talk in geologic timetables. We don't talk in timetables since last September when it rained last and the water washed a little bit of silt down into the hole. We're talking about, Mother Nature is trying to, with the help of gravity, trying to flatten out this earth. And so all the stuff that is on top of the hills washing down into the bottom, and everything upstream is washing down into the bottom. And so we have to cut through that stuff. A layer of silt, a layer of gravel, a layer of water, all that stuff needs to be cut down through. And we need to do that and then bring the very best desirable clay material back into that cutoff trench so that we can compact it properly to slow the amount of water that seeps under the dam out of there.
So the core trench really does 2 jobs. One job is you dig out underneath where the dam is going to sit. You're going to create a foundation for the dam to sit on, but you're also going to create an underground wall to keep water from seeping under the dam. Is that a fair statement?
That's exactly right. Foundation was I kind of passed over that quickly. The truth of the matter is, there's lots of deer out there. The truth of the matter is, that core trench also acts as a solid foundation to support the dirt that comes above the surface all the way to the top of the dam. On a small farm pond that has 3 or 4 foot of fill or 5 foot of fill above ground, that does not mean a whole lot. If you've got a dam that has 25 feet of dirt above ground, that the foundation / core is of vital importance, not just to create a barrier to slow water down, but to support the weight of the dam and fix it so the dam will not slip and be pushed downstream with the weight of the water.
There you go. There you go. Water's heavy, dirt's heavy. You got to have a place to put it that can hold it up. You're not going to build a high-rise skyscraper on the beach.
That's right. If you look at, we just passed 4 giant hotels that are being built here in southern Oklahoma. The work
At
that
the next
went,
stop sign, turn right.
The work that went on below ground is not near 15 stories deep, but the excavation was probably 25 foot deep, and then there were pier holes filled with concrete and steel that went down probably as
At the stop
tall
sign,
as
turn
the
right onto State Highway 74.
building, as deep as the building is tall. So the foundation is very, 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 very important. On a small project, I'll engineer that myself. If we get very much water coming down a creek, if we have a very tall field, I will get professionals involved with that. That does 2 things. It gets people that are trained to tell us
In 5
what
miles,
needs to
turn
be
left
done
onto East County
properly.
Road
They'll
1580.
draw out a set of plans. That's one thing it'll do. But also, we've got a professional's name on a set of plans in case there ever is a problem, that we've got our back covered, so to speak.
Have a finger pointing person.
There we got finger pointing person. I hate to use it in terms like that, but the truth of the matter is, you know, in the year 2022, that's getting to be more important all the time. I've got a couple of different engineers that I try to work with in situations like that. None of them are cheap. None of them will ever tell you what you want to hear unless it's the truth. And they're not trying to sell a project to somebody. They're not trying to make a landowner happy. They're trying to design a dam and a structure that will be safe and functional for, like you said, generation after generation. Test holes done, man, they're big. They're a big part of the process. You know, if you dig 3 of them right down where you think the center line of the dam is going to be, and you're not satisfied with what you've got, the money that's spent to have a professional geotechnical firm come out and do some borings, that's money that's well spent.
What does it cost for a geotech company to come out and do borings and study the soil?
I'm going to say they charge by the hole, and I'm going to estimate that it's probably $500 a hole that they drill. They will drill down the size of a coffee cup. They'll bring that dirt back up out of the ground. They'll take it to a laboratory, and they will run the test that they run on it there. They'll tell you how much moisture's there. They will let you know what size the material is that come out of that hole and whether it will be good for building a lake or a dam. So they're probably in the neighborhood of $500 a hole, and that doesn't get them to the site. They're not going to come out. If they only come out to dig one hole, you know, let's dig that with a...
There's a minimum cost?
Yeah, there'll be...
How many holes is enough for the geotech firm to test the soil adequately on a dam site?
I would say if the holes, if there's difference in the material that's coming out of the ground, they probably need to do it every 100 square feet. On a creek crossing that's very...
in 2 miles, turn left onto
on a
East
creek
County
that's
Road
very deep,
1580.
very wide, they probably don't want to have more than a 50-foot difference in between boring holes. Like I say, that's not the place to try to save money. We want to know what we've got below ground. We've done that before, had 15 borings made. We had a creek that ran perpendicular to the dam, and it was easy to see where the creek was, and then it ran parallel with the dam. The borings that were taken missed the creek where it turned parallel.
So you didn't find that till you started to dig the core trench?
We didn't find that until we started to dig the core trench, and at that time there was no opportunity to do anything but excavate it completely out. We're fortunate that we found it because it was actually, that deeper creek was actually covered with layers of material that if you didn't kind of think it wasn't natural, if you didn't think that these were the parent material, you might have left it there, and that lake would have seeped beyond repair.
So not only is geotech helpful, but it may miss some things that a seasoned operator will get into, and a
Turn left
good
onto East
operator
County
can
Road
see what
1580.
that is in order to work through it. So even when you do geotech work and test holes, don't be surprised if there's something under the ground that you had no idea was going on there. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement, and it's very, very, very important for a landowner to understand. Lots of times we go in, there's
7
never
miles,
a hitch.
turn left onto North County Road
From
3070.
the time we walk onto the property till the time we get the grass seeded on top of the ground, there's no surprises. But as often as not, there are adjustments that have to be made because you cannot know everything that goes on below ground. The story you told about the Model T, that was a deep burial. And That's not uncommon at all. Today it is. Nobody digs a trash pit when you pull on their place to bury trash anymore. But 50 years ago, everybody did it.
Mm-hmm.
So you always have to be prepared to make some adjustments after you get started.
Hey, thanks for tagging along with Mike, Otto, and I on this road trip. You can tell that man is a wealth of information, but even better, he's a wealth of knowledge and experience. Take heed of that knowledge and experience, because you do need to make a great plan. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a project that wasn't properly planned out that went way, way, way over budget. So take the time, make the plan, and build the greatest pond you'll ever have.
Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, tell me how. Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, let's do it now. Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, you're the one that makes fishing so much fun. Well, hey, Mr. Pond Boss, tell me what I need to raise a big old honking moss back. Line breaking, tack tearing up moss back. Hey, Mr. Pond Boss, tell me what to do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.